able to bring it. I won't talk for long. We'll hand over to Kay in a moment. But just, I guess, we've made a decision last year that we really needed to progress the literacy at our school. And it's just been amazing to see the way the teachers have embraced the change that we've made. Working with Kay has been fantastic. We've worked with her for the first day back this year, in week 0, when all your lovely children were still on holidays. We're sort of continuing this relationship with Kay over the next couple of years, and we're sort of working also with Catherine McCauley with this project as well. So it's sort of very much a journey that we're on, but it's a journey that we're on, and we're certainly using Kay as a real support, because she's sort of she probably would hate me to say this, but she's our guru. So I'll hand over to Kay.
Okay, so thank you, Brett and Paul. So I have worked with, now, am I okay here? So working in the area of literacy ever since I came out from Teachers College, or uni as it now is. And when I came out, I actually was a French teacher for a little while because I didn't want to go country. I had 2 young girls, and so I was like, no, they're at school in Adelaide, so I want to stay there. So I was a French teacher, but I was able to wheedle my way into the classroom within a year or 2. And what happened is, when I got into the classroom, I had a student come up to me and say, Madame, I was going to be stupid, and he was in year 2. And I said, Kevin, you're not stupid, I just haven't found or learned the right way to help you learn to read. When I went through uni, it was immerse them and it'll happen. Read to them and it'll happen. And of course, it doesn't happen like that for so many of our students. So what I did is, when I came out and I thought, I don't know how to help someone learn to read, I actually took myself off to some courses about teaching kids with dyslexia and learning difficulties. A lot of them were based in the UK and the US, but we were able to do some of that here online, and we're still doing this and stuff. But what it helped me learn is that the teaching of reading needs to be explicitly taught, so therefore you need to know what you're doing. So from that, it took me onto a journey where I then set up intervention programs in the schools I was at. And I was down south at North Vale East, my first school. Then I went to St John's Grammar School at Belair, and they had a dyslexia unit there. I won't talk about that now. But anyway, they're getting back again. And then I needed to do some of this work in a private practice situation, because there's only so much I could do in school, and I just wanted to keep my skills and my intensity up as well with it. So I opened up my own practice, and I have kids that come and work with me once a week at Fullerton House at Glenelg. You may have heard Mark Lemessurier, Bill Hansberry, some of those guys, Karen Hodson. Mark left us and he went down Goodwood Road with Bartek, the reading doctor. But we all know each other, and we were all very much advocates for getting the science of reading into schools. So I did my private practice, and then I was able to do some work in schools, which is where we need this to be happening. We need them to be teaching the science of reading at uni, so that our teachers can come out and just move straight into it. However, we are working with teachers in schools now to get this all happening, and it's really exciting, because 20 years ago there was just a few of us with our voices, and now we're seeing a really big movement with this happening in schools. Everybody's at different stages. It can be a bit messy when you're in transition. So what I want to do tonight is just give you a little bit of a snapshot as far as what that involves and where we're at here. So it's really exciting for all the people and families that are involved at St Bridget's. So yeah, my journey, I work with teachers, I work with students, as I said, and work through to get this happening. And I'm able to go through and probably take away the cognitive load, so keeping the steps nice and simple, because teachers have got enough happening in the classroom anyway. So let's get what we need to be happening as quick as we can and as quality as we can too. So what matters in literacy? I'm sorry, I'll move out of your way a bit. So how many students do we have that are at, below our expected levels? What are our expected levels? Why are they having difficulty? And then how do we help these learners? So what we need to do is we need to go and look at our language, and we need to study the different layers of it. And it starts off with the oral language from birth. And that's where we are doing the speaking and the listening and the imitating that happens and the modelling. From there, we then come into the phonology, the sounds of our language. We start to get our speech happening. We move into what we call orthography, which is the mapping of the letters and the sounds. And then morphology, when we look at units of meaning, like the S on the end of words means more than one, the plural. When we talk about ing, it means it's currently happening. When we talk about ed, it's in the past, it's already happened. So that is the units of meaning, the morphology, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later too. Etymology is the origin of words, and that's also really informative for our students because we're talking about working memory, not being able to hold as much information. So what do we do to help our students to remember things and to be able to retrieve them when they're working on their reading and their writing and spelling? So etymology can be, okay, why is it that we have words like Monday and month and sun and mother where the O is making the up sound? Well, it's because the scribes decided when they were doing their calligraphy that the U could get mixed up with the M and the W that was around it, so they decided to change it and put in the O's. So these are the sorts of reasons why some of those things happened. So we look at that, and the syntax is like the way we speak and the way we then write. So children will often write as they speak, and what we need to be doing is we need to be looking and improving that language because they've got to move up to the academic language for moving into the workforce and everything too. So they're briefly the layers of the language that we work with. You'll see that little pyramid there. So they are the 3 levels of support. So our first level, tier 1, is our classroom practice. So what we can get happening at our classroom level is going to be better so that we have less students needing help in perhaps small group instruction and that sort of thing. And then when we get to tier 3, it's usually our intensive support, one-on-one, and that would be the sort of thing that I would do in my private practice. We have students that would need education learning plans and things like that. So the idea is we get the knowledge, we get the skills with our classroom teachers so that we can then have less students needing support and we continue with our progress of our students. So getting it right in the classroom. Why are we doing it? Well, the research is showing us the models for how we learn to read, write and spell, and we'll have a look at some of those and keeping it nice and simple too so we don't bore you to death. And then what are those languages and what do we need for being able to teach them? We need scopes and sequences. We need to know where we are at. We need to know where the student is at despite the year level that they might be in. We need to know where we're going next. And we need to know as a whole school what that looks like. Then the how to do it. So we've moved into explicit direct instruction. So we're not going to discover what we don't know. We're going to teach it first because we want to teach it, we want them to remember it, and we want them to be able to tell us what they have learned. So that's a direct instruction model. There is a place for inquiry, but when we're teaching how to read, write and spell, we tend to leave that for some of those other exciting experiments and things like that that go on. Okay, and of course the whole school approach keeps it consistent, keeps everybody in the loop, and when we've got the whole school approach with the staff and the students, we then feel comfortable and confident to be able to articulate what we're doing with our parent community and get them involved in that too. So, and if you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to just ask me away. So I'm not going to go into all that because that is more of what the classroom teachers deal with the different areas of research. But the biggest thing is that we want to take this challenge on together. So we've all got different skills and things that we can bring to it. So it's amazing what can happen when we work together as teaching communities, as classes and as parents and caregivers and stakeholders around our children. So, what has the research said in the past? Well, at 4 years old, we can identify students who may be at risk of learning to read, write and spell. And we can do that with a simple screening test. Now, back in 2005, we had the national inquiry into the teaching of reading. There was a national inquiry in the US and the UK. And one of the biggest things was we need to be teaching explicit phonics. So that's about letters and sounds and the rules of our language. We keep giving them just words, eventually their working memory is going to get full and then things start dropping off the perch. And so whole word, it's like we are giving them the fish rather than teaching them to fish, teaching them to crack that code so they can apply it to unfamiliar words. So the Matthew effect we talk about, kids can come to us in all sorts of levels, depending on background, depending on experiences. And what we want to do is we want to close the gap as soon as we can. If we don't, the consequences of disengagement, behaviour, because they're masking what they don't want to feel stupid, mental well-being, and mental well-being can come into play as early as reception. When kids get to school and they see their mates are starting to read and all that, and why can't I? What's wrong with me? So we want to make sure that we are giving every opportunity for that, and if we see things that aren't going right, we want to act on it, because early intervention is the key as well. And of course we know what can happen. In our jails we've got about a 50% illiteracy rate, so we want to be working on it. This is what the department gives us, the big 6 of reading, so we'll look at that, but have a look there, that oral language underpinning everything. So that's speaking and listening, the experiences that we give our students and everything from when they're born before they come along to school. We'll look at the other areas as we move through. So teaching reading and spelling is actually rocket science. So we need to know how to teach it effectively and efficiently. Our bodies are wired to be able to learn to speak and to listen and model and that sort of thing. But when it comes to reading, unless we have got amazing skills with working memory, processing speed and verbal comprehension, we're just not going to read ourselves. However, our environment can help that to a large degree. So, as we said, we want to get those skills in with our staff, in with our teachers. And reading and spelling is simultaneous. We hear it, we segment it, we're writing it, applying the letters, and then we read it again. So we're wanting to keep it very simultaneous. It's not just about we'll read and then we'll do the spelling later. And the reading and spelling process is more complex, so it needs more time too. But you can see underpinning both of those is that oral language area. So there again are the layers of language that we're looking at. There's some great courses around with some of our American researchers, and we've got some fabulous researchers in Australia too that give us this information to help us move along. So when we put it all together it looks like that, but we're not worrying about that too much as we go through. So let's have a look at our oral language and our vocab from birth. What we know is the usage of vocabulary at age 3 is strongly related to reading ability in year 3. So a student, or a child I should say, who is 3 years of age may have heard up to 45 million words in their life. Not different words, because there aren't that many, but and it depends on the type of talk that we're doing when we're with our kids too. Now that is if that is quite a high literate language-based environment that they're in, the people that they are living with and working with, compared to a child of a very low literacy background, and they may have heard 10 million words or less. But what it did is it got a report called the 30 million word gap at age 3. So that's interesting in itself to see, okay, we've already got kids that are perhaps behind, but it doesn't mean we're not going to do anything. It means we're going to move harder. It means that we're going to let people know what are these things that we can do that can really push our kids up. So, language rich language board, you don't really want to know statistics. Anyway, let's have a think about our words, our vocabulary. With your families, you are going out, you are experiencing family gatherings, outings, holidays, days in the garden, board days, whatever, but that language that you're using is what it's all about. What we have here, you might want to have a look at YouTube and look up the Brain Dictionary. What it does is kind of like a semantics map, like the meaning of words. When we say a word, different parts of our brain light up. For example, if we have a word like grip, there are different ways the word grip is used in different contexts. Get a grip will be different from gripping on for dear life or a pencil grip. But when we see that word and we hear it, until we start to get the context of whatever that word is, we won't know which part of the brain is the one that's going to be activated. If we talk about simply the word top, are we talking about the top of a building? Are we talking about top of, in a mathematical term? Are we talking about top of the class? And that sort of thing. So different areas light up until that context gets known and it links in with the meaning area of the brain for that particular one. So we won't worry about word connections yet, but have a look at that Brain Dictionary. It's really quite interesting. So what else do we need to do or look at doing? We want to have sustained conversations with our kids. We want to have quality verbal exchanges. We want to bring in some new words. When I was giving a parent workshop down at Aldinga, and I was at the Children's Centre, and I had a mum come in to come and sit down and listen, and she brought her 3-year-old, who then went and played with some of the toys. And he said, "Oh, what a curious pattern in the carpet." And I was like, "Oh, no, that's interesting." Anyway, as we went through and were talking about the vocabulary and the talking with our kids, she said, "Oh, my husband used to, when he was changing his nappy, he would just explain to him everything he was doing, he'd talk about the weather when he was doing it or anything." And so that's exactly what it's about, to give those children that language, to listen to it. They won't be able to repeat it back yet or understand it, but it's that training that starts to happen at such an early age. So what we want to do is also speak in whole sentences. We know that we have very informal language when we're out in the yard, when we're talking with our friends in social situations, compared to if we were going to a job interview, if we were presenting something to some professionals or some colleagues. So what we're doing is we want to be quite conscious that we are speaking in whole sentences, and rather than get grunts and one-word answers, we actually want some sentences to come back to us, so answering in whole sentences. So when we do this explicit direct instruction approach, that is part of what happens there. So some people we have to work harder with, but that's okay. There's some screening tools that we use, and some of our kindies are really getting into using that too, which is great. Question matrix. You know when you get some books that come home for reading, it's like questions. Well, we can ask some of the who, what, where, why, when questions. And then if we want to go a little bit deeper, we can ask some of the is, did, can, would, what, might. So then we're getting more of a range of questions. We can use those with our students too. Sometimes you might have seen some kids will come home, they've made cubes. And on one cube you've got the what, when, where, who, why. And on the other cube you've got the is, did, can, would, might, and so forth. So that then can help just come up with some different questions and things without having to think too much about it. So yeah, when we're talking about the questions we ask with our take-home readers, that can help us too. Alright, so we've talked a little bit about oral language and vocabulary. So one of the other big 6 we were talking about is phonological awareness. This is before we bring in the letters. This is from birth as well. This is where it's just hearing the words, hearing sentences, and then we start to break the sentences, we start to look at words. Then those words we start to break up into syllables. And for example, computer. From syllables we start to look at onset and rhyme. So what is the beginning of the word? For example, swing is the first part of the word up to the vowel, so the sw. And the rhyme is from the vowel to the end of the word. Same as when things rhyme in poetry or whatever. It's just the different spelling. The R-I-M-E is used more in academia compared to the R-H-Y-M-E, but they kind of mean the same thing. Then we look at alliteration, which is the beginning sounds, and that's where we get our tongue twisters and things from. All those wonderful poems and chants and things that just seem to be going out of the window a bit compared to the olden days. We start to analyse sounds. What's the beginning sound we hear? What's the end sound we hear? And what's the middle sound? Often that's more difficult. And then when we start getting some consonant blends in there, things get a little bit tricky. And this is a bit of a hierarchy of going to the more complex. Then blending and segmenting. Well, blending is when we're reading. So if I said to you, okay, I'm going to stretch the word out. It's oi, oo. The word is boil, because you've blended them together, which is what we need for reading. When we are spelling, we need to be using our segmenting skills. So the word is swing. What are the sounds in swing? S, u, I, u. And this is what we need for our spelling. So a lot of this is happening phonological phonemic awareness, and you'll probably see or hear teachers talking about Hegarty. And some of the skills that are involved here is what we do. Another one, manipulation. So this is getting a little bit higher end. So say the word red. Red. So change that R to a V and we have bed. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do a reversal. The word is face. What is the word? Face. What are the sounds? And reverse it. Safe. Now, we took a little bit of time there with our working memory because of the different things we had to think about, hold, and put back together. And this is the same with our students too. And one of the first areas of trouble is in this whole phonological loop. Sometimes it can also be articulation, and we'll talk about that too. So this is a really important area, and this is what is happening more in our classrooms today. Not just the business of the early years teachers either. We've got our kids that are struggling up in the older years, and so still those final higher end skills, we still want to be doing them with them. So we talk about the phoneme, the two properties, hearing it and then being able to produce it. And of course, if we can't get it clear, we know that's going to start to have an impact on our reading too. So why is that important? Well, we just talked about from birth how important it is, and it's also one of the richest times in our kids' lives because they're like sponges. So taking everything in, the oral language underpins that literacy acquisition. We've talked about the vocab and how we need to really attend to any early cracks through the screening that we do. So that's just talking about getting those skills to mastery so we can be really quick with what we do, as well as moving on to putting the letters and sounds together for spelling. So these are just some of the researchers that have really come out, and we've now got some great resources that we use with our students. So we talked a little about some of those higher level skills. Here's an articulation chart for some of our consonants. So I'm not going to go into it too much except to say that it's more for the speeches, but you know, sometimes we've got to wait a long time till we get a speech report or we get to the speech pathologist. And there are things that we can be doing anyway in the classroom and at home to support our students. If we look across the top, we see the parts of the mouth where the sound is produced, and down the side we see the airflow. So we can start to see the good old and it is really slight, the difference in where the sound is produced. So we need kids to look at us when we're doing that. As well, there's so we've got those three really close together on the chart. So the and the and the. If we have students that are having trouble, what we want to do, if they're not able to say the or the we want to take a photo of them doing that, putting that positioning correctly, and then we want to send it home so that we can stick it on the fridge and you can correct them as much as you can so that we eradicate it, and we haven't needed to go to the speech pathologist just for that. So that's just a little bit of information there. Okay, we can talk about, we do chin bumps for syllables as we get to multi-syllable words. We want to break our words up so we hear those sounds. So there are different things we do there. I'm not going to get you up and get you to do some of those on-the-spot things. So, but if we had a look and if we did the word, I just want a multi-syllable word, let's do computer. So the word is computer. So the first syllable, com. What do we hear? K, o, So we've got that ability to start to write some of those letters down. Depending, we have to know that we've taught what we are expecting them to write. So there's that side of things too. So chin bumps, we do robot walking and all sorts of things, but we keep our fingers for the sounds. Okay, let's have a look at this one.
Sorry, with syllables, I haven't done this way, I've done syllables for a long time. So computer would be com, pew, ter.
Yes. It's a beat in a word.
So the vowel ends the syllable.
Not always.
Not always.
Com, k, o, so you've got the vowel in the middle, but then we'd be teaching them that it's a short vowel sound. It's a closed syllable, but we won't go into that now.
Yeah.
Pew, what do we hear? P-U. We would have taught certain ways to spell that pew, that U sound, and then ter. Now, we have, when we have multi-syllable words, we don't say all those syllables clearly in our speech. So you will probably say computer. Computer. That is a schwa sound. It is an unclear vowel. But when we're teaching these things, we need to be nice and clear with it. Computer. So and of course, we would have gone through how to spell the sound one at a time in a sentence.
And just one last one.
Yep.
Smaller. So small.
Is a base word.
So you split the any doubles, you split, don't you?
It depends. It depends. Okay. Smaller. We can look at small, which is a base word, and we're adding a suffix, which is like a comparative, because we're comparing. If we talk about ladder, we talk ladder. Now we've got two D's in ladder. The first one is there to keep that first vowel short. That's another part of it. So I would have to draw it all up and
Is that new?
No, it's just that it hasn't been taught. We haven't had the science, the explicitness taught to teachers so that we can teach it to others.
And that's probably the heart of the whole process of what we're doing now. It's not just kids memorising these words. This is kids breaking words apart, being able to manipulate them because they know the rules. And so
When I've been trying to say with the kids, like for example, ladder, I'm like, you split the double, so it's ladder.
Except you don't
And is
say
that
the
now
D
I'm
twice.
50? So is that how we were taught 40 years ago, or was I taught incorrectly 40 years ago?
I don't know what you were taught, but when we do, so you're saying we split it visually down the middle, so that's a syllable division strategy we would look at, but we don't say lad-de,
Yeah.
we say la-de.
Yeah.
The D pronunciation is in the second syllable, but we have to have that D there to keep the first vowel short. If it wasn't there, it'd be later. So, and that's because that consonant keeps the vowel short. And that's what to do with open and closed syllables. And the kids are going to know it, and they're going to come home and be able to teach it to you. So look forward to that.
And some of the colleagues who have started this process in their schools, they said some of the challenges they've got. So they've got parents whose children in year, say, 5 or 6, saying, why is it my year 1 has got this knowledge my older child. And that's one of the challenges, and that's what we're doing. This is an R6 project. So we've got our senior teachers working pretty hard, trying to make sense of this and catching our children up in a bit, I guess, because the explicit nature of this is very different to how we've operated in the past.
Yeah, because I know when I was in school and when I taught Joe, for example, ladder, and I just said I said just break it up. So even though I felt incorrect doing it, I was saying lad, L-A-D-D, line, E-R. So even though I felt that was wrong, it just worked for him.
And we would explain the reasons why as well. So, and what it means is we're breaking it up so that we can then work out multi-syllable words as they move up into high school and they come across these words, and we're looking at chunks. We're recognising those letter sound combinations that we've been doing through our primary years. We're looking at the units of meaning too. So, but I'm always happy to have a chat with you afterwards as well, if you want to. So, let's just go back. Think about the reasons for reading or not reading the following words. Okay. So, what prior knowledge or skills did we need to read these words? The first one. Language, alphabetic code, unless you're Russian. So the second one, if you can remember, long word, so you were dividing into recognisable chunks, syllables, units of meaning. The final word, very familiar? Okay, so yeah, so it's instantly recognised by sight. That's what we want. But it's how we get there. That's the thing. We don't just give the words and they have to learn them, because that, as we said before, there's how many words. We actually want to teach them to use those syllable skills and to use their letter sound knowledge that we move on to. Okay, so spelling task, we're not going to do it, but the point is with your non-dominant hand, you would get a feel for writing some of those words. And why would I be asking you to use your non-dominant hand? Because our kids can often have fine motor issues. That's going to also be a bit of a barrier for them to be able to write and spell as they go. So these are things that are really important and we want to get them sorted as soon as possible. Okay, so there, well, that one, so you can see that second one, you were using your syllables, some of your letter knowledge, and perhaps some morphology, units of meaning. So here's one. Good old reading Dr. Bartek will bring this one out. So, having a look at that, what might that mean? If you've got some sort of a phobia, a fear of something, absolutely. So we have used the morphology there, meanings of parts of words. We've got a hippopotomonstrosolicriptalophobia, something like that. Monstrous, something in that one. I don't know about hippopotamus. But anyway, it means a fear of big words. So, keep that one under your tap for parties. Okay, and then we would go into, okay, I'm going to get you to draw this Toyota symbol. The Toyota symbol, you see it every day, so you should know it. And I just want you to draw it, but I don't want you to take your hand off the page, so you have to do it the correct way. Off you go. Right. People haven't got it.
Yeah, it's difficult if you're not going to disconnect, just if you,
Yeah. Well done,
you've got
guys.
to retrace, you've got to do a bit of retrace.
Well, what made it difficult? No, you're not. And I haven't explicitly taught it. So how can I expect you to do it if I haven't taught it? Okay, so that's why explicitly teaching letter formation, the right amount of practice and rehearsal is what we have been missing. And we need to be able to give ourselves and our kids the time to do it, and then we will get the quality. It's time for quality, it's a great phrase. Okay, so there it is. So what do? We go from, just in case you're interested. We go here, up, round, down, up, and round. Oh, so take a picture if you want. Practice. Right. We'll test everybody and see if they done? Great. Okay, so now it's all linked. Everything that we've talked about so far is linked to the research because we're going to come in with the phonics now. And when we say phonics, we don't just mean that first year of Jolly Phonics. We mean all the concepts, all the spellings for our sounds. That's called our orthographic code of our language. So that's why it's like it is, and I probably won't need to go into that. But the three...
That was really interesting.
Oh, all right, so there you go, there's the history. But I'm making it a little simpler, so feel free to have any of these. So what we had was the Anglo-Saxon invasion of England from the Germanic areas. So they came and they were quite agricultural, and so it was a very basic language with everyday things. And we've still got those words in our language. 1066, the Battle of Hastings, in come the French from Normandy. And when they come in, the Latin base, they bring in their language too. So hence we've got words in our language that have a bit of a French base. And I always say that my dad said, you kids should be learning Latin. It's like, no, my dad, why? But it's because of the meaning, the units of meaning in our word. 50% of our language has a Latin base to it. Then what happened, we started to get the printing presses. So more books were available to the general population. And so then we also started to get more inventions in medicine and science, and we needed to borrow from the sophisticated Greek language. So hence we have about 25% of our language has got a Greek influence to it. Okay, but language is always evolving. We know that when we're looking at the texting that's going on, and some of that is becoming acceptable in our language. So that just gives you a little rundown, and again, some of those really simple short base words in everyday life, and then as you move up to the more complex. Right. Now, since the fMRI scans came in, they were able to look at the brain of a dyslexic reader compared to a non-dyslexic reader. So, what they found was there are actually 4 areas of the brain, but the 3 that we're looking at with decoding, which is using the code, we've got 3 areas nice and lit up and all happening and firing within milliseconds in our non-dyslexic brain. When we look at the dyslexic brain, this is the area of phonemes, hearing sounds. So we can see some things are happening, there's a bit of activity. Then what we have is the area of sounds and syllables. Now, there's less happening here. And then what we've got in this area is instant recognition by sight of what's being read. And that's what a sight word is. It's not a chosen tricky word. It's actually any word that somebody knows by sight. So we've got to think about our definitions a little bit. Okay, so when we saw that, what had been happening with some of the people that had been doing a lot of this, they realised we are on the right path. We're teaching phonics, teaching syllables and segmenting, so that we can put that together, strengthen those pathways that aren't working as they should be within milliseconds to get people reading. Now, there were 3 areas, and the other area is the reading comprehension area. Of course, we can decode, but we then need to understand what we're reading. But we can't understand it if we can't lift it off the page. So we need to be able to decode, and that's what our phonics is about. You might want to have a look at the simple view of reading over a cup of coffee, but what it basically says is, this is our word recognition that we were just talking about, and here's our language comprehension, the meaning. The thing is, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It is 1 multiplied by 1 = 1. We can't have one without the other to have true reading. But of course, when we look at some of our students, we've got different areas happening. If we've got somebody who's got poor comprehension and poor decoding, we start to think, okay, do I need to get a speech in on this one because we've got a language delay? We still know what we need to be doing, but it's a slower process. Okay, maybe we've got somebody who's really brilliant at taking the words off the page, don't really know what they mean, and that's called hyperlexic. And you may find them sometimes in people that are on the autism spectrum. The comprehensions let them down, but they can just read, decode, but it's barking at print. There's nothing being understood. The area where I work a lot and where a lot of our kids are that struggle is where they've probably got some good language comprehension. If you read to them, they get it. They get your jokes too most of the time, but they can't decode. So they've got the poor decoding. For those reasons, when things in the brain aren't firing, their working memory is letting them down and their processing speed. So this is why we do what we do. You can have a look a little deeper there. That just goes through those areas of word recognition. We've talked about phonological awareness, hearing those sounds and the importance of that. Out of coding, so mapping letters and sounds, and then becoming instantly recognising them by sight, compared to all these areas in comprehension, which start from birth, which we talked about. Language, so we've got background knowledge, vocab, the depth and the breadth of it, language structures and use and so forth. So it is a little bit like rocket science, but it's still very interesting. Okay, and then that just shows you another way to do it. We get this happening down here. With the decoding, we can then get to the meaning and the content processor, and we build fluency with the practice as we move through. I won't go into that because I did. Hey, guess what? There's a simple view of writing. That's even more complicated, but I won't go into that now. But you look at the mechanics, posture, position, pencil grip. You know, they're just really basic stuff. Then we start to look at letter formation, punctuation, spelling, spacing, before we even get to ideas about the ideas that we want to write and so forth. So as teachers, we're going to explicitly go through this process so that and then we give the practice and we build on it with our sentence skills and so forth. We need to be doing revision, so you'll see some flashcards happening because everything we teach will go on a card and then we will practice it, because some people need 50 times of revision to get it into that long-term memory for instant retrieval. Others will need 100. In my case, 1,000. But it doesn't matter. This is what we have to do so that we get it automatically. We get the mastery for those, so they can use it in their writing with all those other things they're doing. There's a little bit about what we remember. If we hear it, compared to if we see it, then if we see and hear it, if we do it, that whole multisensory approach coming in the different channels, and then if we can get the kids to teach somebody else, then we're really on our way to understanding what we're doing. So we've got a scope and sequence, and we've got our explicit instruction. Just a little bit about our language. So we talk about English has a deep orthography. So we went through the reason why with all that history of who came in and invaded and brought their language. So we've got over 1,100 ways of spelling the 44 sounds in our language with 26 letters. So that brings in some interesting things. Whereas Italian has got a shallow orthography. There's not so many choices. They've got 33 ways of spelling there, 26 sounds, and usually they're using 21 letters. These letters come in what we call loan words, and they come from another language. Although the French and the Italian have got bureaus of language, they don't like letting in Americanisms and things like that. So, and the French are actually going to kick out some words like beefsteak, beefsteak. We've decided no, we're going back to our words. So, whereas we didn't have that here. So that alphabetic principle, reading is symbol to sound, and spelling is sound to symbol, the decoding and encoding. If we teach this, 90% of our language is actually decodable, but we've got to teach it all before we say that. So English isn't so crazy as we might have thought. So I'm moving on a little bit quick here. That whole word approach that we used to have with our high frequency words, the first 100, you can move on. And if you can't get them, you can't move on. And it's like really, we're just giving them words to try and remember, and they're having problems with the working memory anyway. So we're going to crack the code with regular practice to develop to automaticity, which leads to fluency too. Okay, just a few more little bits and pieces of, our phoneme, grapheme correspondence. So in a word like cradle, the A sound is just represented by one letter, whereas in the word way, we've got 4 letters making that grapheme. But we go from the most common to the less frequent as we move through, and we start to chunk things as well. So it's not just remembering all these individual things, we then start to have some tricks for chunking. We look at position. So there's the k sound. We can use k for a C, using C. We can use the K for k, but that's usually before E, I or Y, at the end of a one-syllable word, after a consonant or 2 vowels. CK after a short vowel at the end of a one-syllable word. These are all the things the kids will learn, and they will say it automatically, so they can just regurgitate it. So we'll be learning lots like that. Later on, the less familiar CH making sound, the Greek influence like chemist, so forth, compared to the French. All right, then there are some other things that we learn about. For example, no English word ends in V or J. So we might use the DGE, edge, 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 odge, udge, because we don't use J, and so forth. We have decodable readers that will be going home more than those levelled readers, because Alison Clark, I won't put it on now because I'm aware of the time, Alison Clark is a speech pathologist, and she has an amazing website called Spellphabet, and she goes through lots of things that you can do at home. But one of the big things is we want decodable readers that have the words of the sounds and the letters that we have taught. So when that book goes home, there is more success rather than hair pulling and tantrums at tea time, because the levelled readers we had, that was predictable text. There was a picture, and it was almost like guessing, and it was like the same words, and then just changing one word, and that was in the picture. And the vocab would often come from everywhere, so you follow a spoken sequence, but there'd be words that have got spellings that you haven't even touched yet. So we want to set up for success by using that. We talked a little bit about the definitions, and when we do get to some tricky words like said, we've still got some predictable parts, some regular parts. But if we get to the word like said and the AI is there, we don't say, oh, sometimes that says because it's hardly in any other words. So that's when we'll do a whole word, because we really got to look at that whole word. We need to spell it using letter names, and we have a little memory tool. So for said, it might be small ants in danger, taking that first letter, little picture there, and so that can help the student until they become automatically there. But we don't do that whole word approach with every word, it's just some of those trickier ones, and especially when they're quite frequently used in the early years, we move up. So that's what we talk about with our high frequency. I'm not going to go into that now. We start with our morphology quite early. In reception, we can talk about suffix s, changes the word to mean plural. And then we would need to say, actually, that S can also make a Z sound, because we've got dogs and cats. So we teach that too, so there are no surprises. We've got syllable types that we go through, because every syllable has a vowel, and it's all about the vowel when we move into that. We talked about syllables, a bump in a word, every syllable has a vowel. Open and closed syllables, when we get to our dog, cat words, we've got closed syllables, so we may as well start teaching our receptions that. With our open syllables, we've got words with the vowel at the end, she, go, and so forth. So hey, we've already got some open syllables that we can work with. So we're bringing in the terminology. The schwa is the tricky bit, as we were talking about before, when we're not clear and articulating clearly our vowels. We just don't in all our words, otherwise it gets a bit stilted. However, when we're teaching it and when we're talking about words, we really need to say carrot, so they know that there's an O there. Now, that will bring you into carrot. Car. The R is in that syllable because it is keeping the vowel sound short, and then the rot. Okay, and that's a little bit more of that one. Bossy magic E jumps over one consonant and changes the vowel short to long. Why is it though that we have give and have that have an E on the end? That's not a bossy magic E. Well, that's because the rule is no English word ends in V, we use VE. And if you find one, I want to know about it. The other thing is it's probably coming into our language at a much later stage. Okay, we talk about independent purposeful activities and we differentiate for depending on where our student is because we want to link our activities to our writing and our grammar lessons and our sentence work. We don't want busy work and fluffy work. We don't want to go into that. You may find that you don't have a list of words that goes home for the week. You might find that you've got a word study book and you've got the pattern in there with some example words and pictures. And what we want to do is expand the vocabulary of our students. That was another one of the big 6. So we can discuss what are some of the other words that have that same spelling pattern. Let's draw a little illustration so we remember what that means because that's what we want to enhance our vocab. We'll do dictation instead of testing 10 words or something. We will do dictation where we are practicing some of the things we've learned in grammar. Is it that we are doing simple sentences? Is it that we are putting some adjectives with our nouns and so forth? So we want to bring it all together and link it in. So we are working smarter, not harder, and the students start to see the links and transfer it into their everyday work. We talked about the etymology, so the history. You know, we've got atch, etch, itch, so match. Use TCH for the ch sound after a short vowel. So why have we got rich, much and such that don't follow? Well, there are exceptions because rich used to be spelled with an E because it was a French word and the E's dropped off over time. So you can start to investigate etymology online. The kids love it. They become real inquirers for checking out words and becoming word nerds, and that's fabulous. And the dialogue that it also presents is fantastic too. Alphabet sequences, it's quite amazing. Kids that don't know their alphabet and they can't point to the right letters, but that's okay. In a reception class today at another school, and we went round, and of course we get the good old element of P, which is about 2 letters. So we do some things that help them with that to learn it. Handwriting, letter formation, always important. Don't listen to what they say about you, just have computers because it's not true. There's a connection with our hands and our brains and our eyes for our writing. And there's a little study saying that even people taking notes with handwriting compared to on a computer, it's more successful for memory when you're writing. And so your scribbles are actually working. So anyway, we want to get handwriting correct as soon as possible, and we want to get our accurate letter formation, because remember that's the mechanics of it, isn't it? We want to then free up for our ideas and our spelling and the higher things. And we can look into a little script. Why do we do that? Well, the research says let's get a faster script and give the students the option. They can print or they can have a linked script. But we want to be able to write a word and not take our hand off the page till the end of the word, and then go back and cross our T's, dot our I's and that sort of thing. The morphology we've talked a little bit about, and all those meanings, the base words, and then what our suffixes and our prefixes mean. So just an example with one base word. Base word means it can stand alone. Root means it is part of the word, it can't just be on its own, you've got to have a prefix or a suffix with it, like the word rupt, to break. We need E, rupt, or another thing, so E means out, so erupt, to break out. So we start looking at the meaning here, and we can do all sorts of things. We're building word knowledge just with one base word, so port means to carry. Re means back, so if you report, you're carrying something back. We go to someone or something who, a reporter, someone or something who carries back, and so forth. So this is what we do with our word building with our kids then. So, Word beautiful. If we were doing syllables, beautiful, you've got 3 syllables. Units of meaning, morphemes, beautiful, full of beauty. So we've got different things that we want to impart with our kids too. So, that was a very quick snapshot. I hope you're not lost, but I hope you got something out of it. And looking forward to working with St Bridget's and the journey that they're on in different ways. And I think it's wonderful and it's really exciting because you've got great staff that are really moving with it too. So, if you have any questions, comments, feel free. You've got about a minute. No, a couple of minutes.
Can you go to quiz on this language, or do you want to have a cake on your table?
We could get some of that information, like,
Yeah.
to be able to explore it a bit more.
Sure, absolutely.
Is that
Some
possible?
great Facebook pages too. So
It's just remembering it, like you said so many things, and I'm trying to remember it.
yeah, absolutely. We
So
can
if
work
there's
that
a
out.
summary available.
And as you said, there's some great websites like 5 from 5 is Australian researchers.
Yeah.
Jennifer Buckingham is leading the way a lot there, but there are so many, and talking with the teachers with what they're using as well is really, really helpful.
Not really sure what Kay said. We've got staff that, I guess, continuing looking at our results of our children and working out, certainly it's not from lack of effort and energy of our teachers. And so certainly what I think Kay's doing is giving us something really solid to work through. We're running from R2s, running with the Initially program. And so there's a strong desire from our staff to really develop this really explicit way of teaching language skills. And, I really admire, particularly our year 4 to 6s who are going in on L page to a certain extent, because these are skills that they have to dip back into a little bit to be able to get really confident with. So, you're about to talk about what the early years team and commitment is telling with making resources and all those sorts of things that they're having to do to be able to put us in a situation where we confidently are able to witness our children in the rehearsal of what the children are doing, so that those neural pathways that we know to develop. But it's all about that's really important. I guess that's why how we have our families supporting what they're doing at home too, just to reinforce we're on the same page. So I guess what we hope to do is be able to run more of these sessions or have resources that we can give to families as well. So I'm not sure from a teacher's perspective, Anthony, you're probably here as a teacher and a parent.
Mum.
Yeah. Do you maybe just want to talk a little bit about Initially and I guess the difference maybe to where we have come from, say with Jolly Phonics or those sorts of things.
I guess starting the new program this year, the biggest difference we've found with starting Initially is the way that they've delved really deeply into the phonological awareness part of reading. Before we've gone through and started the sounds in the alphabet, hearing syllables, rhyme, onset in rhyme, how the patterning in words and how it sounds and how you hear it, what that looks like Kay was talking about the syllables and how words fit together with the ending sounding the same. That's whole rhyming. This is what it sounds like. So you're building that really strong foundation before you're expecting them to pick up a book and read. We've held off on readers, which I guess for some of you, that would be different from when your children are in reception. So readers are coming home, and it makes complete sense now, after a certain bank of sounds have been taught. So when those sounds are taught and then the sounds have been put together to show them how to make words, then they get a reader that has those words in it. So for example, our first sounds have been s, and they will be t and at. When you start putting them together, you can have at, that sort of thing. Then a little reader will come home where you can put those sounds they've already learnt together to make a word. Whereas beforehand, like Kate was talking about with the whole language approach, you were getting, I like my lunch, I like my bag, I like my brother. Well, how are they supposed to read lunch when they've learnt ms and at, and you're going, I like my, look at the picture, look at the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So see how that's different? It's now about what you can decode, what you can sound out, what you can read in front of you based on what you've been explicitly taught at school, as opposed to look at the pictures and what makes sense there. Now turn the page, look at the pictures.
Because that's guessing.
That's right. It's guessing with pictures, which is great. Yes.
Well, my children were guessing most of the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. But one of the things that we used to teach with the whole language approach was what would make sense there.
Yeah.
even running records when we would assess them.
Absolutely.
It's like, don't know that word, what would fit in there? It's like, you're kidding.
Yeah.
We've got to look at the letters and work through the word so that what we taught, as we've been saying, they can instantly retrieve and work through.
And like Kay was saying, the repetition, children need to hear it more than once or twice to have that really embedded in their short-term and in their long-term knowledge. So what we're finding with the Initial Ed program is that each day we start off again by referring to what we've taught for the last 2, 3 or 4 lessons. So you'll have a little section on syllables, a little section on rhyme, a little section on onset and rhyme, and now we're starting on first sentence. Each day they're hearing it again, and it's just not expected that you learnt it yesterday and not again today.
From year 3 on, we had some children who were pretty proficient with their letter knowledge and those sorts of things, who we thought, they might get a bit of brain dead here and been there, done that. But what we found with them is giving them great confidence and having a deeper understanding, which then gives them into that wanting to explore more the whole understanding of our English language. So that's where it's been. I guess we've been really pleased to see that happening. So
I look at my oldest son. He's very fluent in reading, but ask him what it means or tell me what the story was about. He can't. He's seen a speech pathologist comes to the school. I just was wondering, would the school then inform the speech pathologist of what they are doing within the class?
I'll have to Colleen to see whether that's happening.
I would also think the speech pathologist would go, excellent, because that's the case.
Yes,
that's what
yes. I mean,
yeah.
but to inform her that this is what's happening, and then he'll get more support on that side and work together with the school hand in hand, and then plus us at home doing the same thing will be.
And that's like that table that Kay had up there before about what was it what I had on the bottom
Right,
of it.
yeah.
And the same thing, I get little people coming in for interviews who knew dinosaur words that long, but they didn't know the other words or the meaning behind those. And so that's what I guess what we're really trying to do here now is really give them. So the idea is that when children get to the whole notion of readers is that basically we give children the skills and how to break. Then the library's theirs.
Yes.
We're not saying to them, here's your little section here that you can, once we've got them into that confidence, they can actually start understanding that. And that's kind of a big
It's more fun too. Lucy's very proficient at reading and at comprehension, but she's really enjoying her homework now around words, and she's talking about it a lot more. It's more interactive for her and I. So, I think that it's enriched it.
Well, that's what you want. You want that rich vocabulary. We always want to grow and develop them.
And did you know Annie? She's actually, so that's been really good for me, that she's actually teaching me.
And I guess for us too, the issues we often tend to find, particularly say for example with NAPLAN, is that often with the numeracy component of NAPLAN, often they're worded problems. So straight away for children who are already struggling with literacy skills, you're killing them twice. And if you were to give them that as a numerical equation, they go, okay, I know what you want me to do here, because it's in written. And so that's often been a bigger challenge. And so I guess that reinforces why I guess we're wanting to get this literacy the skills at a level where children then can comprehend what the maths question is asking. Okay, that's what I have to do.
And help them not. I was just thinking when you were talking that for children that aren't naturally good or proficient, don't have that natural capacity, that they're going to be able to catch up and be in a more equitable position with their peers who are, because of this way of learning. So because once you feel behind, a child feels behind, that puts them behind the 8 ball in terms of long-term learning anyway. So that's true.
I would notice the last, you're probably going to tell me, maybe 5-6 years, old language skills. And how much of it relates back to the introduction of iPads, I'm not sure, but it seems to be closely aligned. And I must admit, we see it. I remember coming out of footy park once, and this bright light caught my attention, and there's this little person in their baby capsule with an iPad in front of them, glowing, lighting up their face. And I'm thinking, where's the conversation happening? Or the, I know James was fortunate to do some study in the UK, and they banned parents walking to school with their devices because one little person wanted to tell about the moths that had just come out of the cocoons and that sort of stuff, and the parents just, as they're trying to walk out the centre, and this little person saying, "Come and look at the, little moths that have come out of the cocoon," and parents, the staff said, "No more. These are those rich moments, the rich language moments that could be occurring." And potentially we've been guilty of it in the past, so it's easy to hand a device across, and so the oral language skills for us has been something really noticeable that we're having to try and catch up on, because children don't have, or haven't, there's been probably a reduction, or it would appear to be a reduction in the amount of oral language skills that we've been having with.
And also the charms and the nursery rhymes that were that whole, the rhythm of language that we're used to doing. So, that's sort of gone a little bit out, but they're coming back because we've got them in our Hegarty and, our daily routines and things like that, because they're just so valuable and important for that too. So it's great. It's great.
Don't even get Gennaro talking about the benefit of music. And,
it's all good though.
Because it is.
Memory.
And this
That's called pattern recognition, right?
And that's why, and certainly the whole multi-sensory approach is the thing that's becoming really significant and very noticeable. When we first went up, I think a few of us went up to look at some other schools, and you walk into this class and you're thinking, oh no, that is so different to what we've done and we've had happening in our classrooms. That's almost uncomfortable. You're thinking, oh, yeah, as we walk in our classrooms and watching kids highly engaged in what they're doing. And instead of staff on L plates giving this a crack, and so like Kate said, I was taking my hat off to what our staff have been willing to do and support that Brett provides as our learning coach to make this work. And so I guess what we're trying to do is get the word out to our families, so it's not foreign, it's an exciting journey we're on, and we're really investing in it. And with the schools that we've watched doing this program, we've started to see some pretty incredible results.